Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, January the 6th. And as we like to do on Mondays, we'll be chatting with our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. It's a brand new year. It's a brand new Congress. Very soon, a brand new president. So, Bill, Happy New Year. And
Happy New Year to you.
I hope you didn't get too much of the cold weather. We woke up
Oh,
with 22 degrees, so that's pretty bad for us.
we got the cold weather, but we didn't get any precipitation.
Mm.
So the streets were clear, and the driving was excellent. And in fact, yesterday we were out driving on the Bronx River Parkway, which is one of the oldest parkways in all of human history. And there weren't many cars on the road.
Wow.
Weren't many cars on the road at all.
Now, speaking of that, you have something called now the congestion tax,
Oh,
which is
yes, yes. This
what
is
can you? This is, I guess, the latest idea. What
yes.
can you tell me about it, Bill?
Well, I can tell you very little because very little has been published, but it basically amounts to the fact that if you go into New York City, into Manhattan, and you enter Manhattan below a certain street, in other words, in terms of the map, you will be charged an extra $9
Hmm.
simply for entering, and that is called the congestion tax because theoretically it will deter people from entering that part of the city, and things will all be wonderful in New York City for drivers, except the drivers who wanted to go below 60th Street or whatever it
Right.
was, who will be screaming Bloody Mary, bloody,
Whatever they scream.
Bloody Monday over the
Right.
fact that they have to pay $9 and simply for entering because of a theory that this will deter people from entering.
Well, I guess is it related to climate change or is there?
Everything is. Remember that everything
Right.
is,
Right. Yeah.
but I don't know what it's related to. But it seems to me a very dumb idea because you're taking from Peter and borrowing from Peter, giving it to Paul. The fact is, even if people are deterred, they want to go into the New York City.
Hmm.
Well, they say, well, yes, but the people are now going to have to use the subway system. Now they have a car. They bought a car for a reason, and that was to use it. And it's going to make a lot of people angry. I don't think it will really have that much effect on traffic because people figure out another way to get into the city. Uh,
I guess it must be for the purpose of raising more revenue, right? I guess that must
Well,
be
they
the.
expect yes, and they think there's going to be a lot of revenue raised, which they tell us with great pride, I might add, that this revenue will go toward repairing the subway system, which apparently, if we didn't have this new deal, wouldn't be repaired. That doesn't give me much confidence in the subway system.
No.
If they have to have a special tax just to get the wheels going, basically it is a confirmation of what we already know, and that is that New York is a mess. It
Right.
really is.
Well,
And
yeah. I mean, just from talking to you and talking to other people who live up there, the last thing you need is another tax.
oh, that's one of the main reasons people give for leaving New
Right.
York.
Right. Yeah.
And here we had there was a survey taken of all 50 states,
Hmm.
and I think New York and California rated the highest in number of people leaving.
Yeah.
So the solution to that is obviously a new tax.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Let's raise more taxes so that more productive people will leave. But it applies to everybody, right? So even if a person, I mean, any driver who comes in a certain area, right, has
Yes.
to pay. It doesn't. It's not regulated by how much income you make, or it's simply
No.
It's targeting people regardless of their income level, right?
I think that's absolutely true, but I'm
Wow.
not sure of that because, like everything else in New York, it's going to have all kinds of exemptions
Hmm.
and provisions, and then more exemptions. And you can be sure that a lot of people who should be paying it will not be paying it because they get some favor from a politician. I don't know exactly how they detect you. I think they're using that system that detects license plates numbers,
Yeah.
and your license plate is in the state system attached to a credit card. So you they get you that way.
Well, I was talking to a fellow from New York actually Saturday afternoon, who was visiting from New York, and he was telling me that that's exactly how they're going to get you through your license plate.
Yes.
And that's similar to the way we have our toll tags or our tollways here. If you don't
Yes.
have the permit that you can buy ahead of time, or what you put on the window and the windshield, then they get your license plate and they send you a bill.
Yes. Well, that
And
looks like we're going to get that too. Now,
yeah,
that adds an additional expense, the bill sending expense in New York. You could be sure that the act of sending the bill will probably be more than the bill. So somebody's going to have to pay that too.
well, the postage, I mean, the postage is going to be almost $1 pretty soon. So
Yes.
pretty soon it's going to cost the state more money to collect the money than it brings in.
Yes.
And
That's New York.
that's New York. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
anyway, I hope the congestion tax doesn't make people too congested,
No.
uh, mentally congested.
Well,
But
it's not good for the heart. That's for
no,
sure.
no,
Not good for the heart.
it's not good for the wallet either,
Yeah.
which is another problem. Another problem up there. But anyway, don't get snowed in. But apparently, they're getting a lot of snow everywhere in the Northeast.
Uh, well, that
Washington D.C. got some snow today.
Yeah, they for some reason they don't call that the Northeast anymore. I don't know why, but the weathermen don't call it the Northeast. I think they are probably embarrassed in Washington to be associated with the Northeast. Um, but yes, if you go to a state like New York, you may not have had any precipitation in the downstate area, but in the upstate area, it could be snowing very hard because the temperatures are lower up there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's the area closer to Canada where they may have I think they're going to have a new prime minister
well,
pretty soon.
eventually,
Eventually,
I've been trying to figure out exactly what he has in mind.
right.
He's going to leave the chairmanship of the Liberal Party, which I think is down to 3 members,
Right. Right.
but he's going to stay on, I think, as prime minister until they go through a whole process of selecting a new prime minister. But by the time they do that, his term will probably be up anyway.
Yeah, well, I don't know how, parliamentary elections are different. They're just kind
Yes.
of, it's not like our elections where you have a calendar every 4 years
Yeah,
or 2 years or whatever. I mean, apparently they just call for elections,
that's true.
which
It
is a cool
depends.
way to do it.
It is. It's their different parliamentary systems do it a different way, but some you can call an election before the term of the office holder is up, and that becomes the new term. In Britain, I mean, for goodness sake, in Britain, they can change governments overnight.
Right.
I mean, if they have a vote of no confidence, they let the prime minister know, and no matter what he's doing, they're going to be there with the moving van that night.
Yeah, no, that's right. I remember when Margaret Thatcher left. I
Yes,
remember exactly what you're talking about. They had the video of what they call 10 Downing Street, I think it
yes,
is.
10 Downing.
And that's exactly right. I mean, she was out on whatever it was in the afternoon, and the trucks were there the next day packing up her family bags. And John Major, I think, came after
Yes.
her, if I remember from my recent history. Anyway, that's you're talking about these calling elections. I bet George Bush, the father, first
Yes.
George Bush, would have loved to have been able to call elections right after Kuwait.
Yes, yes.
he, he would have had a much easier time winning than he did a year and a half later. So
That's true.
it's funny how that can work both ways, I guess.
Oh, well, there are arguments for a parliamentary system, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of arguments against it. Now we
I don't
chose,
like it, honestly,
yeah,
Bill. I don't like the parliamentary system. If for no other reason, then you have all these political parties, and you can actually have what you have in Canada, where you have this crazy coalition between
yes,
Trudeau's party and this party that I don't know how many members they have, and yet just that little coalition there can actually put somebody as prime minister. That's what happened up there. Um, Trudeau, I think, got like 33% of the popular vote, but yet the coalition got him in. I don't
yes,
like that system. I prefer our system where it's every 4 years or every 2 years, and you've got a cert term, and that I just think that it has more stability and it's much easier to understand. Bill, that's
it
just my
is.
viewpoint.
It is. You're right on both counts there. At the same time, others would argue, Well, you're stuck with the president
right?
for 4 years unless you can impeach and remove him, which has never happened. Or there's no. I mean, there would have to be some intermediate step that
Hmm.
would allow the country to get rid of a president sooner, but not have to go through the impeachment process.
Right. No, that's interesting because I mean there are times when a president has an approval rating so low
Yes.
that maybe a no confidence vote would help. But anyway, back to uh, back to January the 6th. I was just thinking, Bill, I was in the car when January the 6th, 2021 happened. I recall hearing a lot of it in the car. Today it was very smooth. Nothing much happened today. Not even that um, Democrat from Maryland, whatever his name is, Rankin, I think it is. Not even Rankin brought up an objection today to
Yeah. It
Trump's
was very
victory,
smooth.
which I'm glad he did. And there's no need to bring that up this time of
Yeah.
year, Bill.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I was watching this morning, of course, and I have to say the insanity of CNN just continues. That's all they wanted to talk about was the January 6th of 4 years ago, which allowed them to talk about Trump, which allowed them to say, in effect, is he a convicted felon? Should he be allowed to be president? And I think something may still be pulled at the last minute. The inauguration is 2 weeks from today, as you know. I can't wait. I mean, a lot of damage can be done in 2 weeks, and
yes,
I have a feeling that somebody is planning something. They may not, the Democratic Party may not allow it. There are enough sane people in the Democratic Party who might be able to prevent something crazy from happening. But what I'm concerned upon
yeah,
about, is the fact that what happened in New Orleans last week can happen again.
right,
And we want, you know, these things are not difficult anymore. The
mhm,
terrorist groups have had plenty of time to practice, to know exactly what to do. They get expertise, which obviously was a factor last week in the bombing in not in uh, New Orleans, but the bombing in Nevada,
In Vegas, right?
in
Was it
Vegas. Yes,
Vegas? Yeah,
yes. I mean, they had a very sophisticated setup. The guy who did it was a regular Army soldier who had gotten professional training in electronics. And this is not difficult anymore. We forget that the 9/11 attacks were pulled off by, I think, 26 men and did more harm to life than Pearl Harbor did.
right.
I mean,
No,
so
you're right. It can be, and then the other thing that fascinates me every time you have one of these things like in New Orleans, or then we get into this, we're splitting language as to whether
oh
he was
yes,
alone or whether somebody helped him. And I guess unless we can find, Bill, unless we can find that the accused had a identification card from ISIS, we
yes,
cannot say that he was from ISIS.
that yes, you
Uh,
can't. Yes,
I mean, it's like we need a an employee number
yes.
so that we can verify the roster and see if I mean it's crazy.
Well,
Of
there are
course
elements.
he worked with other people. He was
Yes,
radicalized.
yes, that's the point. And
Yeah.
we now learn from this morning that he traveled to Canada and to Egypt right before he did this. I don't think he was on a pleasure vacation.
No.
I mean, I really don't. And I just wonder who he saw there. Now we
Well,
know.
and I'll tell you something about Canada, Bill. Forgive me for interrupting you, but let me tell you something about Canada. You talk about a place getting radicalized.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh
I mean,
yes.
you see some of these demonstrations in Montreal and in Quebec. I mean, Montreal and not Quebec, but Ontario. And you see some of these demonstrations, and you go, "My gosh,
Oh
is
yes.
this? Are these the Canadians that used to play hockey,
Yes.
or did I mean because that they've become very radicalized up here.
Very much
We
so.
we have too. I'm not. I don't mean to just put it on them, but I think they have more on a per capita basis. I think it's more than us.
Yes, well, that's true. And look, Canada, in recent years has become a very soft country. I mean, they used to uh, play beyond their weight
Hmm.
in wartime. They would, I mean, for a country that has a relatively small population, in World War II, I think they had the third largest navy in the world. Uh,
Wow.
you can't imagine that today. And they have these demonstrations. in which people are allowed to destroy other people's reputations, then well, it's freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, and we want that, even though the United States isn't as free as we are. I mean, Canada is a mess. I mean, I understand that they have a very small force of helicopters that they sometimes can't get off the ground. National defense is not a big issue in Canada. And I think that there is some doubt that Canada is really an ally of the United States any longer. I
Well,
think
I
that,
think they are in spirit in the sense
yes,
that if you talk to Canadians, like Canadians, there's a bunch of them down here, and if you talk to them, they're very pro-American.
yeah.
And a few that I've had the chance to meet through social media, they're very pro-American. But you're right. I mean, the leadership, Trudeau in particular.
Yes, well, his father
Uh,
wasn't a hotshot either.
no,
You know?
there's that rumor, Bill. I'm sure you've heard it that the Justin's father is Justin is the son, right? The
Yes,
Justin's father was actually Fidel Castro, and they show you these photos of
yes,
the
yes,
two.
yes,
And
yes.
I have to laugh. I have to laugh because I don't know that anybody can prove something like that, but I have to laugh because
Well,
there are some pictures where I don't know if the pictures have been photoshopped, but
mm,
there are some pictures where let's just say there is a resemblance, Bill.
yes, yes. Well, you know, we are in a very tense time.
We are.
I find it amazing that the attacks in New Orleans were covered very well by the press in most cases, but it's fading away. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they assume the investigation is basically over, and let's move on, as they say. Let's move on. And I'm sure that the people who conducted these horrible events will now be analyzed by people on the air, and we have to find out what grievance they had.
Right.
They must have been horribly damaged somewhere, and I just think that these people will say that this is a man who should not be punished. He is a product of society, and I think we're all heading in the wrong direction. And
Yes,
besides, either we or Israel are guilty.
that's no, you're right. You're right. It is crazy, but I just love it when they keep saying, "Well, there's no evidence that he was working with anybody." Well, uh, I don't know. Bunch of ISIS flags in his truck.
Yes,
A
that's
bunch of. I
yes.
mean, you reach a point
And
where you
and you can go
right.
into any store now and buy an ISIS flag.
That's right.
Have you ever seen an ISIS flag advertised or on sale at any store in the United States? One day after the horrible attacks in Israel, the 9/11 attack, I would say the October 7th attacks, they had uh, they had Palestinian flags flying all over the United States. Where did they get them?
Well, Bill, you and
Maybe through
I,
Amazon. You know.
yeah, well, you and I speculated, where they got them at the universities
Yes.
a few months ago, and I think we were having a little bit of fun with it, saying that they have a like an inventory house somewhere,
Yes.
and then they text it out. They text people out and saying, "Look, come by at 9 o'clock and get your flag,
Yes.
and let's march down whatever street later
I
today."
think that is exactly the way they do it. I
It
mean,
has to
they
be because all
contacting.
the flags look brand new. Have you noticed that?
Yes, they all
All the
have the crease.
flags look like
Well,
they're brand new.
well, they all have the creases in the same places. You know. now I
No, I
want
mean it is remarkable,
now I
remarkable.
want to know. This is, I think, important for national security. I want to know after a couple of demonstrations with those flags, if they want to clean them, will a dry cleaner do it? I mean,
That's right. Well, I know. And remember that, but that reminds me of that story, Bill. Maybe you remember this back in when the during the Iranian hostages, when you had these truck drivers somewhere who didn't want to deliver something because they said it was for Iran. Remember that?
it's
Something
something.
like
They had
yeah,
a
something
few
like
of
that.
those.
So you wonder how many of these laundromats, when they get all these flags, they go, "We don't like this. We don't need that business. Take it
Yes,
somewhere else." But but it is crazy. I mean, I think the basic point, though, Bill, is that we do have this evil within us, within our boundaries,
yes,
and
and
somebody better wake up to it.
well, I think it's probably too late to wake up to it. We have so many illegals, and so many of them are, as they say, are young men of fighting age.
Mhm.
And it is so easy to pull something like this off. I
Mhm.
mean, all you it doesn't take that much in terms of equipment. You know, a rented car. and some gunpowder and a target that's easy. You saw that I'm sure clip on television last night of the car racing down the street and a woman just barely got out of the way. I mean, had that car been up on the sidewalk, a lot of people, more people would have been killed. And
Right.
I just think we're heading for a terrible, terrible tragedy.
I
But
agree.
the difference will be that Trump will be president, and it may be that the terror groups may cool down because they know what's going to happen if they attack the United States. This is not Joe Biden. This is
No.
Donald Trump.
No, they won't have to, you're right. I mean, I do think that is a factor
Yes.
that
Oh,
these people
of
calculate. There's
course.
no question in my mind that is a factor. Well, Bill, speaking of January the 6th, I wanted to bring this up before we talk about other issues. But I just thought it was interesting that in the last, what would be basically generation, 65 years, we've had four vice presidents who ran for president:
Yeah.
Nixon, Humphrey, Al Gore, and now Kamala Harris. And all four lost. The exception was Bush, by the way, in '88. But all the others lost their pursuit of the presidency. So it was their constitutional duty to read the results and announce that the other guy had won. And I don't know if that's ever happened in American history as frequently as it has recently.
Yeah.
But clearly that's got to be very difficult to do, to go on
Yes.
TV and say, okay, the votes are in and I lost. That's got
Yes.
to be
Yes.
a tough deal.
Well,
But I thought
and
Kamala Harris today handled it, as well as she could.
well, yes, yeah, I think she was actually okay. They're
Yeah,
going to try to, she's been defeated. Leave her alone. In victory and magnanimity. I don't know what her future is. I think that what will hurt her in the future if she tries to run again is that she ran such a rotten campaign and she couldn't do the basic things. She couldn't answer questions. So there will be others, and they'll say, "Well, I mean, she's a woman of color. We have to do this. We have to make it up to her." No, we don't. No one deserves the presidency,
right.
and I think that they will be looking for female candidates, but they better be prepared for the job.
Right. And I think they may also be uh, they they may also be looking at more than just female candidates. They might
Yes.
say to themselves, a few white guys wouldn't hurt us,
Yes.
because I mean they got devastated with the male vote,
Oh,
and
absolutely. And they
and
also got, yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I
They
was going
also
to
got
say
devastated with minorities,
they
more
did.
minorities moving to the right.
That's right. So it was not a good year for identity politics, and I think the fellow Shapiro in Pennsylvania probably knows that as well as anybody. I
Yes.
don't know the other governors. I don't honestly. I don't see much of a future for the governor of California
Well, no, I
or
think
for the
he's,
governor of Illinois. I think those guys are gone.
yeah, I
They
think
may
they are.
stay in. I mean, they may keep their jobs out there, but
Well,
as
the
far as
governor of Illinois can
nationwide,
finance his own
well,
campaign, but
that's
and the
true.
governor of California, I can't see him going very far because
No.
he's such a goofball, and and although some people will say that he was cheated and this and that, uh, California is in terrible condition.
Mhm.
Terrible condition. I mean, the all the basics are still there, but they're ruining everything. There is clearly a situation there where they probably have enough illegals in the population to elect anybody as long as they can get the vote to that
Mhm.
population, and they'll figure out a way.
No, you're right. I mean, but the state is a total mess, to say the least. Well, we have a new Congress. The speaker came back, and I was listening to it on the radio on Friday when it happened. And I think it really shows the influence of Donald Trump, Bill, that he was able to get to the couple of people who were outstanding and said, "Hey, I need you," and he came through. So I think it really shows that Trump has a good influence in the Republican Party. They don't have a big majority. That I think is
That's
true.
right, but that's a very good point to bring up. They don't have a big majority, but if you calculate it, the size of the majority is not as important as the breadth of the
Mhm.
majority. If you look at the standard maps that they use after elections to show who won where, the amount of red on that screen is going to be enormous. It goes across the country. That
Mhm.
his victory was not deep, but it was broad, and any one of those areas that he carried, he can build on that. He can be. They know how to build
Yeah.
on it.
Mhm.
And the Democrats, I don't know who they are. I really don't know who they are. They don't seem to have any real identity, except to tip their hats regularly to the Communist Party, and to what AOC, and to the one in Minnesota, and to some of the others, and they seem to have immense influence. I think that influence basically comes from their influence within universities.
Right.
The universities can shout pretty loudly.
Bill, getting back to what you were saying about how the map, all the red on the map, you can actually draw a straight line, and I did this, by the way. You can actually draw a straight line from San Francisco to Washington D.C. and
Yes,
literally split the country into north and south. And I think you only traveled to 2 or 3 counties that Kamala Harris won.
yes,
It is amazing how if you just look at the map or you look at it county by county, it's remarkable, like what you're saying about his victory. I mean, he cleaned up in so many areas, including here in Texas, where a county named Starr County, a county that had not voted Republican for over 100 years, decided to move 17 points toward Trump. And this is one of the most Hispanic Mexican American counties
mm,
in not just Texas but in the whole country. And again, it came down to the issues, dissatisfaction with the border, dissatisfaction with the economy, inflation, of course. As we learned later, dissatisfaction with, wanting to shut down the refineries and oil production when
yeah.
these people are the ones who work in the refineries and drive the trucks that take the energy from the refinery to and from. They don't want to lose those jobs, and they're good paying
No,
jobs. So
they're very good paying jobs, especially in trucking.
right.
Truckers today are paid a lot of money.
They are. So you've got this new Congress coming in, very loyal to Trump, especially the House. The Senate, you still have a couple of people who could be a problem, but they have 53 votes, so they've got more than enough votes to spare. But you have a Congress that I think knows they have to put up some points very quickly.
Very quickly, and
Yeah,
speed is very important now because as the president serves more and more months, he usually gets less and less popular,
right.
and Trump can come in with a big hammer, and really use a lot of political capital, but get things across. And
Yeah.
of course, he has the power of executive action.
And on the border, that's going to matter a
That
lot, as
a
well
lot,
as
yes,
like reversing this decision by President Biden. I guess he announced today or yesterday that they were shutting down more exploration or
yeah,
production. Um, you know, he can reverse that. That's
he
the good
can,
news. Yeah, that's the
yes,
good news.
and he can do all kinds of things through executive action. For example, linking it to national defense.
Hmm.
People forget that the breakout in the 1950s of federal aid to education was made possible by calling the law the National Defense Education Act. As soon as they called the law that, nobody could vote against it.
Right. That's right. That's right. Bill, do you get the feeling, speaking of the president and the Congress, do you get the feeling that he will want to deliver the State of the Union as soon as possible? I kind of get that. The State of the Union, I guess, doesn't. There's not a specific date.
No,
I remember Reagan one year doing it like at the end of January, and others have done it that way too. If I was President Trump, I'd be looking for a State of the Union a week after he became president, and
yes,
and 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 really go out there and put the plan on the table, Bill.
I think that's a very good idea. Of course, one problem with it is that State of the Union addresses are usually not heavily listened to
No.
unless there's a crisis. And
Mhm.
I don't know. And also, when you have a State of the Union address, you're a target immediately because the commentators feel that's perfectly fair game. And if he does it immediately, makes the speech immediately, he'll have the problem of not having that many people confirmed
Hmm.
to his cabinet. I think that they're going to stretch out the Democrats are going to stretch that process out to give him as many problems as possible.
Could be. It could be. I mean, everything's on the table, I guess, from the Democrat standpoint. And look, the Republicans would probably do the same the other way.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to have to make some of these choices that sometimes you just have to look for the best option. And I think an early State of the Union with a very clear presentation of what he wants to do. And the other thing, too, that I believe, Bill, they have to work out as soon as possible is see how much they can get through reconciliation. Because
Yes.
reconciliation is just a simple majority. And, I was listening to President Trump today. He was on the Hugh Hewitt show. I would recommend the interview to anybody. It's on the internet. You can just pick it up
Yeah.
on YouTube. And he was talking a little bit about this he wants to do and that he wants to do. And on immigration, I thought he was really interesting because he said he's not opposed to doing something about the Dreamers. That makes politically a lot of sense, Bill,
Yes, it sure does.
because that's an issue where I tend to agree. These are people who came here with their parents. I mean, I know some of them are almost 40 years old now. I know they're not
Yes.
kids anymore, but still, I mean, I don't think they're going to be deported anyway. So why not just at least legalize them in
Yeah.
some way so they
Yeah.
can? But that's an opportunity where he can get that and score that. Now the Senate though is just because of the Senate, you need 60 votes. So that's why that's always going to be more complicated, Bill.
Oh yeah. That's the filibuster rule.
That's
Look, though, the one thing about the Senate that's very good for our side is that we now have a clear majority in the Senate, and that is going to play a very important role in the selection of judges.
mhm.
I mean, the Democrats can be really kept out completely by the rules, and Trump will be able to name Supreme Court justices with a very, very good chance of getting them confirmed. The Democrats might want to play ball and say, "Well, okay, we'll give you a certain number of judges, but you got to give us something in return, and we won't charge the guy with this. We won't put this on the record." I don't think we have yet reached that level of common sense, and I think that one thing that the Democrats are going to shoot for is to tie up the Senate,
Right.
which can be done by filibustering, by other things, by bringing out uh, le- legislation that on its own is very popular, but then when you look at it very carefully, it'll do a lot of harm. But they can sell it to certain parts of the country. Um, it's going to be it's going to be a mess, and I fear that things are going to happen to the country while the mess is going on. That's going to make it very difficult for the country to pull together.
Yeah. Well, and there's always, the unexpected, the terror attack or the situation in Ukraine, Taiwan. There's always issues like that could change an entire presidency. I mean, 9/11. I mean, on the day before 9/11, President Bush was talking about being a conservative or compassionate conservative, if you
Yes,
remember. And he wanted to focus a lot on education. And then 24 hours later, he's a war president and everything changed.
yes, of
So
course.
I don't know what's going to happen, what surprises is going to happen around the world. I thought it was interesting, Bill, maybe you saw this, that Zelensky of Ukraine was praising President Trump, saying, maybe he can end this thing. I thought that was interesting.
Well, that's an interesting point you bring up because with 2 weeks to go, if you were, for example, Hamas and you were willing to make a deal on hostages, would you want to make it with Biden or with Trump? And you're going to have the chance because that's a very small amount of time in a negotiation. On the one hand, you can say that, well, uh, Biden has been a little more fair to us. He hasn't wiped us out. Maybe we have to thank him. But on the other hand, they say, what are we doing? I mean, he's only going to be there another 10 days and probably doesn't recognize more than five. Why don't we just forget him? Make a nice letter, give him a letter of thanks, and try to play ball with Trump, who is going to be a very powerful American president. It's not an easy question to answer.
No, but maybe President Biden can remember President Carter at the end of his presidency, where they held up the hostage deal
Yes,
until it was clear that Reagan was president. Bill, President Biden has done some things by executive order here lately, the pardons, this what he did in the last couple of days about energy. And I thought you raised a good point when we were talking off the air, that if he felt these things were that important, why didn't he do it before? The same
that's the
with the
point.
pardons. The same
Yes.
with the pardons. If he's all of a sudden against the death penalty, why didn't he do that in the campaign?
That's exactly the point. And
Yeah.
what he's doing now with the drilling is against the obviously against the will of the American people, but he just doesn't seem to care. He's pacifying the part of the party that can't be pacified.
But then that raises an interesting question, something I have been thinking about for quite some time, actually from the very beginning of his presidency, that he seems to be acting. I mean, he's surrounded by people whose only motivation is to reverse whatever Trump did.
That's exactly right.
I mean, there doesn't seem to be anyone there thinking, is it really a good idea to end remain in Mexico? I mean, we may not like Trump, but it is working. It seems like nobody there thinks like that. Everything is, well, if Trump signed it, we have to reverse it.
Yeah.
And I fear that there's just a lot of irrational people like that around him
Oh, there are
making decisions.
because the people who are in charge of the Democratic Party today are not the old mainstream Democrats who are going to say, "What can I do for my constituency that's going to get me elected?" These are people who put ideology first. Everything is in the ideology. We can solve a problem, but it has to be done our way.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
ideology on its own gets you nowhere. It
Yeah,
really
it
does.
doesn't.
It
It eliminates things like remain in Mexico, which was
exactly,
working, which
exactly.
was working. And people forget that was actually negotiated with the Mexican government.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
It wasn't a unilateral American policy. It was negotiated with the Mexican government. Now, you mentioned something, Bill, and I wanted to bring this up because you mentioned that they may be able to get some Democrats if they do a deal on the hostages. But I think there may be a few more Democrats in play, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Number one, on deportations, they see what's going on in the country and how angry some of their own constituents
Yes.
are
Hmm.
about this, and they fear that this might be a good time to play with Trump and at least get the issue behind him. The other issue is that three of those new Democrat senators who came in today, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada, were elected by less than a point.
Yes.
I mean, those elections could have gone. They could have been like Pennsylvania, where he won by less than a point.
Yes. Well, some of the major elections have been very, very close. The fact is, though, that this time Trump won all 7 of the contested states. No one
Mm-hmm.
expected that at all. No
No.
one. So it's the old story. If you got 50 states and you win each state by 1 vote,
Yeah.
you can become president by 50 votes.
Right. No, you're
So
right. I mean, it's like it's like in a baseball analogy. If you a 2-1 victory will get you the same W as a 10-0 victory.
that's right.
And so that they have the same value as far as the standings. But I just think that if you're a Democrat, let's say from Nevada, I'm just thinking of that lady in Nevada. The last 2 Democrats who won in Nevada won by less than a point. Michigan, the lady who won there, she won by less than a point. Wisconsin was even closer than that.
Yes.
So you have to wonder if these people are sitting back saying, there's half of the people in my state didn't vote for me, and I got to represent them too, Bill.
Yes. Well, I think that some people may come to their senses. It depends on how far along the damage to the Democratic Party is. There are people who'd say, I'd rather be right than president. It's that whole idea. And as most people point out who know something about it, this is not like the Olympics where there's a silver medal.
Right.
There are no silver medals in politics. Either you win or you lose, and winning is a lot better.
When you think of a couple of recent elections here, Bill, one that I remember very well, one that you remember very well. In 1980, 539 votes in Florida made George W. Bush president.
That's
You
right.
think about that.
Yes.
And then in 1960, the one you remember quite well,
Yes.
I don't know what the number was, but there weren't many numbers that made John Kennedy president. So
Very
uh,
small
very small, yeah.
and questioned even today as to whether his father said his father owned property in Illinois. His father was a pretty bad piece of work, and he was quoted as saying to Jack, who would come to him for money, "Look, I'm willing to pay for the victory, but not a landslide."
Yes, yes.
I think the donors are going to play a very big part because the the donors used to contribute somewhat to the Democratic Party, but now they have another interest, which is cleaning up the universities. And these are guys with billions of dollars to spend, and I am going to just guess that they're going to play a big role in the future of the party. Either you do things our way and grow up, or we'll go somewhere else.
Yeah. There was a fellow named, there is a fellow named Julian Epstein. I think that's his name. And I sent you the article, you may remember it, where
Yes,
he was coming down very hard on former President Obama
yes,
and saying how disenchanted the party is. Look, I think a lot of these Democrats know one reality about 2024, and that is that Trump himself maybe was not that popular.
yes.
There are still people who dislike him, but the issues that he represents are very popular.
They are, and I think also that they got used to him in a way, and they were not getting used to Kamala Harris. Her
Mm-hmm.
her numbers were just going down and down and down, and I think that what you saw in the years, and I'm sorry, in the days following the election, people said it's so calm, nobody is rioting. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
People said, I don't like Trump, but I trust him in an emergency to do the right thing, and
Well,
that's
I'm sorry. Go ahead and
go. No,
finish.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's. I think that's how people voted.
Yes.
It was
It was
one of those things where,
defensive voting.
yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where they said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the phone rings at the White House. Who do you trust more? I know that's a cliche about the
Yes,
3 o'clock in the morning call. It could come at any time, but the reality is that I don't think people trusted President Biden to do that. They didn't trust Kamala Harris. They just feel that Trump is more of an executive. Maybe that's the word.
that's right. Yeah, more of, and a man who is known for his toughness. And I think people are seeing this country pushed around all over the world, and they at least they know they're going to have a guy batting for them who is tough, a good negotiator, and committed to the country.
That's it. That's it, and that's what they need right now. That's what they feel. They feel that they need at this moment. Well, Bill, I'm sure there will be many Mondays ahead of us where we'll be talking about this. We got a couple of more, yeah, a couple of more Mondays before he becomes president.
Yes,
But maybe the next time there'll be more talk about the cabinet positions. We'll talk more about that. And but I did hear one thing today that I thought was very interesting. There's a lot of excitement about Secretary of State Rubio.
yes,
Uh,
he's
people
very
like,
popular.
yeah, he's very popular, and people also respect him too. I was listening. I don't remember who it was, but they were talking about President, let's say Secretary of State Rubio dealing with Latin America, and they feel that he's just the perfect person for that.
Yes, he is. His background and everything, and he's been a very good senator, and not an abrasive senator. So
No,
I think watching him is going to be important. I think that if he plays his cards right, uh, he might be the next nominee.
that's it. I mean, that's the thing that there are, and one last thing I'll say about that. The person who's very likely, if everything goes well with Trump, J.D. Vance, of course, has the inside lane.
Yes,
But I still think very highly of DeSantis, and I think very highly of Rubio, and those are two men who I think could very well be. Uh, I mean, they're both young enough to wait.
That's right.
So, I mean, you could see some real interesting nominees down the road. The party seems to have a good bench,
Very good
which
bench.
which is the exact opposite of the other side. They don't have a bench at all.
They don't have.
They have a dugout, but they don't have a
They
bench.
destroy all their candidates long in advance of the election.
That's
They're
right.
very efficient that way.
Well, as you know, I don't know. I remember one time a baseball commentator. I was listening to a game, and one guy said to the other, "Yeah, they've got a bullpen. There's just nobody out there
Right.
who can throw strikes."
That's exactly right.
And this is the feeling you get from the Democrat Party. Yeah, they've got people on the roster, but they don't necessarily throw strikes or are very well known. And when you think about it, Bill, that is a problem because it seems like other than what Democrats outside of California, Illinois, and New York
Yes.
out there who are prominent.
Well, that's the point. They don't let anybody get prominent until they reach the age of 80. That's it.
Right.
So we'll
Well,
have
that's it.
we'll have a lot to talk about in the next 2 weeks.
Yes, a lot to talk about. And as always, I thank you for your time. And
My pleasure.
I hope that everything works out well with the weather in New York. One thing we know for sure that there's not going to be a playoff game played in New York because the Jets and the Giants are done.
No, that's right.
So no snowy games in New York in January as we've seen before. But Bill, as always, thank you and have a great week.
You too, Silvio.
Thank you so much. Our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. We do this once a week. We chat about politics, and I just have a funny feeling that we're going to be doing a lot of interesting chats this year. But what I said about President Trump having a State of the Union as early as possible, I think, I like to see that. I like to see a State of the Union maybe before the end of January. And other presidents have done that. I remember Reagan one time did it. But anyway, again, thanks to our friend Bill Katz. Thanks to you for listening. Everybody have a wonderful day. And it's very chilly here in North Texas. It's it was 22 this morning. It's in the high 30s right now, sunshine, so that helps. But it was very chilly this morning, and I think it's going to be chilly tomorrow morning as well. So we'll talk to you later. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.